if I give you a crazy bicep exercise to do and you do a few sets of it, but then you can still curl almost as much as you always could, I kind of wonder, like, did that really sap anything from your muscles? Probably not. But if you do some crazy leg training and then you try to get up off a chair, but you can't because you're so weak, man, probably stimulated some good muscle growth. Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength. And today I have to chat with you about something called RSM. It's a term I made up, but it makes some sense, I think. RSM stands for raw stimulus magnitude. And I think raw stimulus magnitude matters. And one of the ways in which it matters is ranking exercises based on how much of a probability they have in just growing muscle. And I mean just growing muscle, which means we don't care about other stuff like fatigue. That's why it's called the raw stimulus magnitude. I think it's an important concept, and I have a specific thing to talk about, a specific set of cases in which it's really, really applicable. Because we usually, on this channel, talk about stimulus to fatigue ratio, which is just a slightly modified version of raw stimulus magnitude. So let's get into it really quick. Raw stimulus magnitude is my way of having a few proxy variables to account for how much muscle growth is this, let's say, exercise or rep range or program, in this case, exercise, how much muscle mass is this likely to stimulate the construction of? I compose it of a few different things. First is the mind-muscle connection, which I have a little bit of a different way of envisioning than a lot of folks, and that's, do you feel the tension in the target muscle when you're doing the lift, deep, stretching, uncomfortable tension? Or at higher repetitions, do you feel a distinct burn in the belly of the muscle? If you can say to yourself, training any muscle you want, when I train my chest, I don't really feel a lot of tension through my chest, nor do I really feel a burn at the end of the set with higher reps, the probability that that exercise really stimulates chest hypertrophy is now probably lower than if you really felt an insane ripping tension during every rep, and especially towards the last few reps, a searing burn in the muscle. The other thing I use is the pump. If for 3 sets of 10 of 2 different exercises, one exercise, like, yeah, you got a pump, whatever, but the other exercise, you were just bursting through the fucking skin, man, a big pump probably, and there's good research, theoretical research to support this, a little bit of direct research as well, but things that cause robust pumps tend to grow more muscle. If you think about it this way, when you get your best pumps, it's when you're new to training, you're training really hard with a lot of volume, and you're eating lots of food and getting tons of rest. That's when you get your best pumps. Well, it's also when you grow the most. I don't think that's by accident necessarily. And while the pump might not cause muscle growth, every time you see the best muscle growth, you usually see good pumps. Another one is perturbation, to consider a muscle that has been perturbed by the training. The more perturbation a muscle experiences from a given exercise, the more likely, in my view, that that exercise is going to really stimulate some nasty muscle growth. Perturbation is characterized by a few things, most notably weakness. If I give you a crazy bicep exercise to do and you do a few sets of it, but then you can still curl almost as much as you always could, I kind of wonder, like, did that really sap anything from your muscles? Probably not. But if you do some crazy leg training and then you try to get up off a chair, but you can't because you're so weak, man, probably stimulated some good muscle growth. Another aspect of perturbation is sensory motor dysfunction. You can get shaky, you can get crampy, like your muscles can seize up on you, and also your ability to coordinate your movements really, really degrades. So try to train the living shit out of your triceps and really, really effective high raw stimulus magnitude exercises and try to shoot a free throw. You might be like, whoop, it goes nowhere or falls halfway short. Or if you try to push the power, it just goes over the backboard. You're like, the hell, I lost my athleticism. The muscles are so messed up and the nerves associated with them have such trouble communicating that you can't even use them in reliable athletic tasks anymore. Try brushing your teeth after a crazy bicep workout. You're like, first time holding a toothbrush. That's really good sign that the exercise did something. And if you have much less of that in a given exercise, if it doesn't mess you up a ton, lower chance that it's going to grow you. And lastly, in raw stimulus magnitude is the element of disruption. This can be acute soreness you feel right after an exercise is over. If you do walking lunges for the first time in a while, you'll feel sore immediately after the first set. But more commonly, it's expressed as delayed onset muscle soreness. And so if you get some delayed onset muscle soreness, and really the more muscle soreness you get from any 1 or 2 or 3 sets of an exercise compared to any 1 or 2, 3 sets of another exercise, if one makes you really, really sore, one makes you much less sore, not at all, the one that makes you really, really sore, all other things being equal, is probably going to lead to more gains. So mind-muscle connection, pump, perturbation, and disruption all add up. We can sort of try to tabulate, any way we tabulate them, the exercises that check more of the green boxes tend to have the highest raw stimulus magnitude. Exercises that don't check as many have a lower one. Now, all exercises have some raw stimulus magnitude, otherwise they're really not training that muscle group at all, but it's a spectrum. Some just have more, especially for any given individual at any given time. What does RSM tell us? It's how much muscle growth we're likely stimulating. That doesn't mean you get the muscle growth. You have to eat and sleep to do that. But stimulating the beginning of that process, that pathway, is a big deal. The more RSM you have, the more muscle growth you're likely to get if you can recover. Which brings us to the concept of stimulus to fatigue ratio, or SFR. Stimulus to fatigue ratio is the RSM divided by fatigue. It's the amount of muscle growth stimulus an exercise gives you divided by how much fatigue it gives you. Such that if you have a really high stimulus but an exorbitantly high level of fatigue, it might not be the best exercise in many contexts, but not all, which is what this video is about. Fatigue is composed of things like joint and connective tissue stress. If one type of skull crusher hurts your elbows more than the other type, it's probably not the best choice. Axial fatigue, if you're trying to get a big back and you're doing a ton of deadlifts, it really beats the shit out of your back in a way that bent rows and pull-ups just don't. Then there's systemic fatigue, which is composed of at least 2 parts. There are physiological indicators of high systemic overall body fatigue. Things like your sleep gets messed up, your hunger gets messed up. Lower hunger is typically, even on a fat loss diet, you can get low hunger. And you're like, I must really be overreaching. My systemic fatigue must really be really high. And of course, a lower just energy. Like you just don't have enough energy. You're really tired all the time. That's a high level of systemic fatigue. I mean, think about it. If your back workout made you have less energy when you're shopping for groceries later at the store, it has to be systemic. You don't shop with your back. Even your fucking feet are dragging. That's systemic fatigue. And also there are psychological correlates of high systemic fatigue, things like a desire to train. If you train hard enough for long enough, at some point you get sick of training. And that is a good indicator that systemic fatigue is now high. So you take all those variables, joint connective tissue fatigue, axial fatigue, and systemic fatigue, and you divide them into the raw stimulus magnitude. And from that, you get stimulus to fatigue ratio. What the SFR tells us is which exercises and which training approaches, and in this case, exercises for the purposes of this discussion, which of them cause the most growth or the most growth stimulus for the least fatigue, the most benefit for the least cost. That is critical to understand for the next part of this talk, which is to ask the question of who needs raw stimulus magnitude the most. Not stimulus to fatigue ratio, which we almost always talk about as the gold standard of exercise evaluation, but raw stimulus magnitude. It's for folks that have 2 things going on for them. Folks that want to grow as much as possible, because if you don't want to grow as much as possible or just a lot, who cares, right? Just do some exercises, you'll be fine. And people that are in a position at the same time while wanting a lot of growth who have no realistically restraining cap to their fatigue accumulation that they can create. For example, people who train 2, 3, or 4 times a week. I mean, it's very difficult to accumulate really deleterious levels, notable levels of fatigue if you train hard twice a week. I don't know what else you're doing with your life, but it's much harder. And if you train 6 times a week, stimulus to fatigue ratio starts to get real important because you just can't generate that much fatigue and not pay for it. But if you train twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, you're not really concerned about fatigue all that much because most of the week you don't spend training, you spend it recovering, and you just don't need the help much. Beginners generally fall into this category. As a beginner, You don't have enough muscle mass to get a lot of systemic fatigue going. You can't even recruit enough of your muscle mass to get local or systemic fatigue to get really high because you just don't know how to do that yet. Beginners have a lot of trouble really trying that hard. And a lot of times they don't even have the work capacity. They just get too tired to keep doing the workouts. You can't even beat them up. And then most times, as per recommendations here on this channel, beginners should only be training, 2 to 4 times a week. So beginners kind of bring in all of it. And so if you're really, really concerned about the fatigue component of an exercise for a beginner, like joint and connective tissue stuff, I get to some extent. But systemic fatigue, axial fatigue, but what are we talking about here? Nobody's getting a lot of axial fatigue squatting 95 pounds for sets of 5. Come on now, right? Not nobody, but very, very few people. And beginners have such a huge window of adaptation, and they adapt so quickly that fatigue just almost never a concerning factor. One of the kind of pieces of the overall puzzle I want you guys to maybe integrate from other videos that we've done is typically our RP recommendation for when to deload as a beginner is like, ever take a week off twice a year for vacation and don't lift weights and you're good. Whereas for advanced folks, oh my God, we got 8 different heuristics just to figure out when you've got auto-regulated deload, adaptive deload, pre-programmed deload, combination approach. Holy crap, there's all kinds of fucking weird-ass science there. For beginners, these people, they don't even need a deload, hardly ever. So like, how much could the stimulus to fatigue ratio even matter for folks like that? This also applies to smaller, less strong lifters. I think when I typed it out, I typed weaker lifters, but that tends to come across as slightly offensive, understandably so. So if you're not like, world's strongest man level strength and you weigh, $130, $120, $140, that's in pounds. For international people, good luck dealing with our superior Navy and nuclear arsenal. I'm just kidding. I had to put in some American Eagle type shit in there every now and again. Smaller, less strong lifters cannot generate either the axial fatigue or the systemic fatigue that really becomes ultra concerning in most cases. Think about smaller lifters. This is going to come off awkward. Like you think about your forearm. Notice I'm moving this way, not this way. This is different. What is it going to take for you to train your forearm so hard that they accumulate enough fatigue to affect the whole system? Like, what are you, crazy? But if you think about it, folks that are much less strong than average and much smaller than average, people who just start lifting weights in high school, for example, their hamstrings are the size of my forearms. I can train my forearms 6 days a week, no problem, with 4 sets each time. Try training your hamstrings like that if you're stronger. You'll break into pieces. But folks can do it when they're beginners and they're just not that strong and not that big. And another big factor here for being a person for whom raw stimulus magnitude may be more important than stimulus to fatigue ratio is for people who have plenty of time to train, but low external fatigue sources. So someone that's like on summer vacation from school and they just go to the gym 4 times a week and they just bum around with their friends and eat food and prank call people and sleep for 12 hours a night. Like, you ain't got nothing else going on. Now, if you're trying to train, you're also training for a marathon. You also run a corporation on the side and you're trying to get into some kind of art activity with your wife on the weekends. I get it. Overwhelmed. Too much. And even a little bit of training, you got to be like, look, I got to worry about fatigue here because the rest of my life brings in a lot of fatigue. But the rest of your life brings in you mostly just recovery and crazy levels of food and adaptation. Like, you're fucking pretty golden. And the reality that you'll hit some kind of cap where like, whoa, well, your fatigue's way too high occurs, but it occurs once every 16 weeks or something. And who the hell out of sheer monotony and boredom can continue to train for 16 weeks straight? A lot of us, because we're addicted, but most people, hey, like once every 16 weeks, take a week off and you're good. If that's you, stimulus to fatigue ratio is a great concept to know and understand, but it may not be your most pertinent concept that gets you the best gains. The raw stimulus magnitude is much better of a bullseye for you. Let me give you guys a predictably stupid analogy for this. Raw stimulus magnitude is how much you get for what you buy. Stimulus to fatigue ratio is that integrated into how much it costs. Stimulus to fatigue ratio is like a budget. For example, if you make $50,000 a year, or in the countries of Europe, 50,000 euros, which really doesn't buy you anything because fucking stupid economy. Anyway, $50,000 a year. If you make that, you probably shouldn't just try to buy any car, even if it's a car you like. you probably want to buy something like a Honda Civic, a car I drove for many years and I love, one of the best cars ever made. Why? Because the Honda Civic's SFR, in a sense, its budget friendliness is amazing. But remember, in this analogy, RSM is like how good the thing is, what you get. What exactly do you get with a Honda Civic? The RSM is like meh. Like, it's not fast. It's not luxurious. It symbolizes that you're a very thrifty person, maybe? You know what I'm saying? Nobody's writing rap songs about motherfuckers pulling up to the club in a Honda Civic, stacked sitting on bricks. Like, what? I mean, did you say Honda Civic? That can't be correct. So what you're getting out of the car is like, it'll take you places, it's got air conditioning, it's reliable, and it's cheap as fuck. RSM, not incredible. Fatigue, so to speak, very, very low. The cost is very, very low. And if you make $50,000 a year, which is to say your fatigue cap is realistically quite low, Honda Civic's a great car. And any other car that's like way more money, man, that's really stretching your budget. It's not a good idea. So this is the bodybuilder in this example. Someone who trains 6 times a day, good God, 6 times a week. Someone who has to do cardio, someone who's prepping for a contest and has the burden of drugs on them and all this crazy crap and trains their own clients and is really trying to make their career work. And they're enormous and jacked. And I mean, they really, anytime they pick an exercise, they have to care about how much fatigue it imparts. It's going to affect other exercises, other muscle groups. It's going to accumulate fatigue way too much. They're going to have to deload too soon. How do you integrate that with the diet? It's a big deal. It's a very tight functioning system. One thing goes, the other thing has to adjust. Just like making $50,000 a year and having to buy a car. I can't just buy anything. I'm really budget constrained, which is why stimulus to fatigue ratio for people really fatigue constrained is a big deal. It should be. It's number one. But what if you make $500,000 a year? An amount I made when I was -2. That's right, my parents invested on my behalf. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for the condo, the lake house. Scott, what else did my parents give me? Disney World. That was nice. Disneyland, I never got, and I never forgave them for that. Did you say great genetics? Yeah. Do you see any great genetics? You know what? You laughed way too hard at that. $500,000 a year compared to $50,000 a year. If that's what you make, your fatigue cap, SFR terms, in other words, your spending limit is much, much higher. You're the equivalent of a college student who sleeps 9 hours a night, gets amazing dorm food that he can take a bunch of protein with him, if they don't notice that you're taking it, does like 9 or 12 credit hours, whatever the minimum amount is, nothing super hard, just normal distribution classes, and trains like 3 times a week. The realistic, terrible choices in exercise selection on SFR you have to make in order to overreach that person in a too short of a time is basically there's nothing, you can't do it. You can have them do partial deadlifts till they're blue in the face. Next week, they'll be recovered to do it again with 10 pounds more. That is the analogy here of making $500,000 a year. If you make $500K a year, you can lean into luxury or speed or status on your car. It can cost $100K. It can cost $200K. You can get a Lambo, and it's still worth it to you because your cap on spending isn't really realistic. If you buy a $200,000 car and you make $500,000 a year, not a lot of people in your life are going to be like, dude, are you crazy? But if you buy a $200,000 car making $50,000 a year, a lot of your friends should be like, you are crazy. You didn't think this through. On the other hand, that makes sense. But maybe underappreciated is a rich dude saving tons of money by buying good God. A rich dude saving, let's say he wanted to buy some kind of Camaro or some shit, some kind of new Corvette. Let's say it costs $75,000 and a Honda Civic costs $25,000. A super rich dude, guy who makes $500,000 a year, saving $50,000 by buying a Honda Civic instead makes about as much sense as a beginner only trying to do ultra SFR moves, because there's lots of folks that have figured out the SFR concept on their own or with the help of RP, and now they're really clued into it. And some of them are beginners, and some of them are smaller. Some of them don't have a realistic fatigue cap. But you're like, don't see any barbell bench press in the program. And you're like, what's up with that? Like, yeah, the RSM's really high, but it's too much fatigue. Too much fatigue for who? That's like a rich dude saying, I don't want to buy a Camaro. I stick to a Civic. What do you do with your money? Do you have a bathtub we fill with money? Well, that's actually a really good idea, but here they got something wrong. Is it Scrooge McDuck? Is that who did that, Scott? The diving through the gold coins? Yeah. There's just two problems there. One is a density problem. If you try to dive in a pool of gold coins, you just impale yourself and you can't walk anymore. The coins don't move out of the way for you. The other problem is gold coins don't feel so good on your skin. But let me tell you, $100 bills, my pajamas are made of $100 bills. Guess what my bed is made of? I'll wait. Also $100,000 bills. Maybe that's what you're doing with your money, because why are you penny pinching on the fucking Honda Civic? What are you, crazy? That makes as much sense as someone who's a beginner who's like, well, I only dumbbells for me. Barbells beat me up too much. Beat you up too much for what? You can't heal by next week? Oh, no, I heal. So what's the extra buffer for? Well, they don't know, because they've been reading about SFR, looking at SFR as a concept. They've been integrating it. They seem to understand it intuitively. And they notice that a lot of their favorite evidence-based bodybuilders, they use the concept. And they're like, well, I'm going to be really good. I got to use the concept. Yeah, but you're not adjusting for the differences between people. The rich guy with the car, he needs the status. You know what I'm saying? Parka, Scott, if you were a female of reproductive age, attractive, and you were standing outside a club appraising vehicles that were parked there, by valet, of course, what kind of car would really get something moving down there for you?
Like a R8.
That's it? That's all it takes?
Dude, R8s are great.
R8s are great, and exactly the kind of car somebody pulls up to the club. Pagani Utopia. Have you heard about it, Scott?
Oh, you wanted a fancy one.
The Pagani Utopia is actually modeled after like a 1920s car. And I always say 1920s was peak rich guy times. That's what I'm talking about, right? So R8 pulls up. The rich guy maybe doesn't need the R8, but the R8 yields him something. He pulls up on the R8 and bitches. I don't even have to say it. The ushy gushy. That's what he's getting for that stuff. In the same way that a young, smaller dude, you know what I'm saying, a little Harry Potter physique in college, no offense, needs high RSM, abusive exercises that drive the most muscle growth stimulus to put slabs of beef on his body. And you could say, but hold on, an R8 costs like, I don't know, 200 grand or whatever. Like, isn't that really crazy spending for picking up girls at the club? Well, if you make $500K a year, not really. And if throw SFR to the wind, isn't that a bad idea? Well, if you're a young dude in college and you have tons of time to eat and sleep and rest and recover, you don't need SFR that much. You need RSM much more. In both cases, the cost, be it money or fatigue, is just not the same for both groups. Relatively speaking, it doesn't affect them the same way. And thus, some of us need a Honda Civic to be training with high SFR exercises, but others of us, you know what I'm saying, we need a little G-Wagon here and there. Scott, is a G-Wagon, is that going to get me anything at the club that I'm on?
I mean, that's like the in-car now.
G-Wagon. Yeah. I just imagine being like the guy who like the head engineer for the G-Wagon, head designer, and like you're like just driving your regular Tesla or whatever you own at home, and like you hear that song come on, and you're like, people make music about the car I built. What a fucking strange world. Ooh, who made this? And you're like, oh, it's an artist. You look it up, and it's somebody who's, like 18 grilled up teeth and face tattoos, criminal record. You're like, oh, all right, guess this is what my car means now. Make a car for criminals? In any case, hopefully with all the straight analogies, you guys kind of catching on to the idea that raw stimulus magnitude for some people who are not very fatigue constrained can matter more in their training than stimulus to fatigue ratio. And I'm going to, just in a few minutes here, build a program using the RP Hypertrophy app. There's a 3-time-a-week program, and you can use this with other frequencies as well, RSM, Raw Stimulus Magnitude Program. It is a basic, tough program to harden you up, to get you fucking big because you're small. And if you're not small, do not use this program. It'll beat you to death. It's going to put slabs of beef on your body, and then it's going to prepare you for more advanced, more nuanced, more SFR-ish training later when that becomes a pertinent concern. We're going to use the 3-time-a-week whole body template, which means you train more or less whole body every single time, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That template is available in the RP Hypertrophy app. I'm going to pick some exercises as examples that are high raw stimulus magnitude. And you can either do this workout verbatim if you like, or you can make your own similar one and just accept the concepts and principles. But hold on a second. How the hell do we choose the right exercises here? I wish we had a list of rules that told us what exactly leads an exercise to be more likely to be high RSM than low RSM. Now, obviously, you could test it yourself. Do a bunch of exercises and see which ones fuck you up the most. That's the highest RSM. And by you, I mean fuck up the muscle the most. The rest of you, who cares? It's not SFR. But I'll save you some time. I have 5 rules for life. Jordan Peterson. No, wait, we're a couple rules shy. 5 rules for raw stimulus magnitude exercise selection. They don't always work, but goddamn are they better than not having any rules at all. Let me explain them to you, and then I'll build a program. We'll build a program together. Rule number 1. Compounds are typically more raw stimulus magnitude than isolation lifts. That is not a categorical rule. It's an average rule. So leg extensions, dope. They're dope. Squats with a barbell, yeah, that'll fuck you up. Second rule, when you do compounds, there are 2 types of compounds, 2 biases of compounds you can do. Distributed and focused compounds. Focused compounds are still technically a compound lift because they involve multiple joints, but they heavily bias one muscle versus the other. For example, wide grip bench press. It's the analogy I use most of the time. Yeah, it's compound, but your triceps get hardly dick out of it. Your chest gets a lot. Distributed compounds distribute the load through multiple muscles and multiple joints relatively evenly. A close grip bench hits your pecs, sure, but also your triceps a ton. And because of that deep stretch range of motion, and now your front delts get hit even more. So you get 3 muscles fucked up for the price of 1 movement. Boy, oh boy, that's intense. And usually the range of motion is bigger for those, so the raw stimulus magnitude is higher. Number 3 rule. Free weights, on average, require more from you systemically than machines. So it's not always true that machines have low raw stimulus magnitude, but I think it's a little bit more true than average. So free weights, we're going to be picking more free weight movement than machine movements on average. And for beginners that don't have a lot of muscle mass either, they need to be learning those free weight movements anyway as the very base of their ability to move in the gym. So 2 birds, 1 stone. Huh. Goddamn dead birds. Or Dragon Ball Z bird, where he's flopping along and you throw a stone at him and he just swats it out with his wing. And then the Vegeta music comes on. He's like, fool, human. And you're like, oh, this is not going to go well for me. And then he fucking throws a stone at you. In any case, what the hell am I talking about? Number 4, high range of motion versus low range of motion. Range of motion means your muscles need to be contracting for longer each rep. It means they're high probability to get into a real nasty stretched position. They do more mechanical work, which means they fuck you up more. For example, instead of deadlifting, conventional, why don't you put a platform underneath you or just put the 25s on the bar instead of the 45s as the biggest weight? Stack as many of them shits as you need to get your working weight, and then do deadlifts from a deficit. Folks, if you've never tried 3 to 6 inch deficit deadlifts before, 3 to 6 inch, am I right? Try it. It'll fuck you up like you didn't think was possible. This is just harder than the regular deadlift and throws more beef onto your body. And 5, self-supported versus externally supported moves. Rows with a chest support, we do chest supported rows, they're dope. Good stimulus. But a cable flexion row, still a machine, but there's nothing supporting you. So every time you're reaching deep and you don't want your shit to snap in half, parts of your back have to be contracted and active that are simply not a requisite in the chest supported version. So if you have to support yourself against gravity and against movement, it's probably higher raw stimulus magnitude. And if you can recover from it, will probably slap more beef onto your whole body. This is whole body stuff, by the way, guys, than a supported situation would. So those are the 5 rules. Your program doesn't need to look exactly like mine. Just try to use the 5 rules for RSM exercises if you evaluate yourself to be someone that realistically fatigue is not a problem for, and you kind of want to get as jacked as you can. This is a good idea to try. So let's switch over to Scott the Video Guy's computer, and I'll build a program for you, and hopefully we'll avoid lots of the other tabs that are always open and always staring at me, and they have hub and XX something on them. I don't know what it means, but I'm not clicking.
Make sure the mute is on.
Perfect. All right, folks, RP Hypertrophy app, link in the description if you want to try this out. So we are going to find a template. We are going to filter it for 3 times per week. We got a cool little selection screen here. We'll say we're male for today, though that for me changes based on a daily basis. And we want whole body. Let's see what filters out. Hey, look, the 3 time a week whole body male template. Strange times. You'll notice the exercises or the muscle groups are already prearranged. Chest, triceps, back, biceps, shoulders, quads, glutes, hamstrings, calves on Monday. On Wednesday, it's the reverse. And on Friday, it's another iteration of that. This is a really cool variation to make sure that you're training your whole body relatively evenly and not just like, because if you start with chest and shoulders every time, then really chest and shoulders get an awesome workout every time. And if you end with hamstrings and calves every time, your hamstrings and calves are like the 7th and 8th exercise to be done. Fuck all that. All right, so let's plan a new mesocycle. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, everything's already in there. And let's go fill in exercises. So for chest, I mean, come on, this is easy. We're going to do, let's see, compound, distributed, free weight, which by the way, body weight for sure counts as free weight, high range of motion, self-supported versus machine-supported. Check this out. Deficit push-up. How do you fuck with that? That's 5 out of 5. And I'm going to go through and choose muscle group by muscle group, just to make sure that this isn't super, super confusing. So chest, we're going to need a little bit of a different angle, but we're going to want all the things hit. So let's see if we can hit here search to save some time. And incline, there we go. Let's see, dumbbell press. Incline dumbbell press fits all of our stuff. I mean, I prefer barbells a little more here, but nothing wrong with dumbbells, so we're going to go there. And then chest here is, we haven't hit that lower angle yet, and it hits all of our shit. So really no matches? Oh, that's right. Dips are a tricep exercise. I'll use them somewhere else. What are we missing here? We have a flat press. We have a dumbbell. Let's do another incline movement. And bench press, incline, narrow grip. Everything's sorted. Triceps. So skull crushers in. I love it. Triceps down here. Well, why are we even tempting fate here? Dips. JK. Well, these are free weight dips. Just body weight only. We can always change them to dips with weight attached, but I'll just leave these in here for variation's sake. And then, let's do something overhead. Barbell overhead tricep extension. Fuck yeah. That shit'll put meat on your bones. Let's go to back. I mean, this is pretty straightforward. Barbell bent row to start. Hell yes. We need something vertical. So now we're going to do some pull-ups, and we want distributed. So we're going to do some underhand grip pull-ups. That seems really good. And then we did bent rows and pull-ups. What else can we do for back? Let's see. I guess lat prayers are an option. We don't need to do every single angle for everything. Let's scroll through back, see what's on the agenda. Dumbbells, barbells, chest support, underhand easy bar row, biceps, and it's a different kind of row. That'll work really well. All right, moving on to biceps. Let's just cut the chase here. Normal curl for biceps here. And let's get the dumbbells going. And we want something that really stretches the shit out of us. So we will do incline dumbbell curl. And biceps on Friday, nothing terribly wrong with a cable curl every now and again, just to illustrate to you guys that, like, not every single movement to the fucking end of the world has to be high RSM, but on average, we're trying to pick movements that fuck us up plenty. Shoulders, barbell upright row, check. You guys know I'm going to pick next is SU Super ROM, dumbbell laterals. And, there's some good cable movements, that a huge range of motion that we can do for shoulders. So we'll actually try to do free motion Y raises. Those are really, really awesome. Very, very challenging. Ooh, quads. Fuck it. Barbell split squat. Sorry, but that shit's going to happen. And then what else we got for quads? We said no machines, but what else? What kind of stuff do we have here? Barbell squat. Ooh, pendulum squat sucks. Let's put that in there. That fucks you up good and proper. And quads here will be, of course, barbell squat, high bar. Beautiful. All right, glutes. There are a lot of options here. At RP, we categorize deadlifts under glutes. So we are going to do deficit deadlifts. That's going to fuck us up real bad. And then for glutes, I think the next time we train them, we are going to do some kind of lunges and a real gnarly high RSM lunge. Oh, that didn't work. Reverse lunge with a barbell, that blows in the best way possible. Well, let's see. Barbell squat with sumo stance, good enough for glutes. Hamstrings, this is pretty straightforward. Dumbbell stiff-legged deadlifts are cool, but they don't allow for the same loading as barbell ones. So we are going to go to stiff-legged deadlift with the barbell. We're going to take a little break for our hams, a kind of different type of movement pattern. And we are going to do seated leg curl. And then we're going to come back and do good mornings in our next hamstring attempt. Where are you at? Barbell good mornings suck. And then lastly, calves, who gives a shit? See you guys next time. I'm kidding. Sort of. Yeah. The idea of RSM for calves is kind of curious, but belt squat calves, to save some time, we'll do stair calves. And then, do we have a calf machine around anywhere here? Oh, Smith machine. Just any calf machine at your gym should do just fine. Boom. Everything taken care of. Create the mesocycle. Hell for noobs. There you go. 6 total weeks, accumulation, 5 weeks and a deload of 6, easy. You can, even if you're, beginner enough, just take a few days off and just start again. No need to do the whole week of deload. Of course, pounds, because we live in these United States of America. Create the mesocycle and voila, you enter your body weight. It spits out everything you have here. And you even have a calendar showing you how much bullshit you're in for the rest of the time that you're training. Folks, give this a shot. But more than giving it a shot, I want you to give it some thought. Think about, in your case, is stimulus to fatigue ratio more important? Is raw stimulus magnitude more important? Or are they sort of roughly even importance? Based on which one is more important is how you're going to select your exercises, organize your training, and see the best results for you and nobody else. Anyway, link in description. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. See you next time.